Hello and welcome back to the Barrel Vision Spotlight. There's some cold tea in here. I just pretended to drink it that time. I forgot that I'm supposed to start these that way, with a cup of tea. I let you down. I let myself down more than anyone. Anyway, as you can see, today we are talking about the Warthog Auto 210, aka the first primary weapon for the engineer that you will encounter. And it is probably the very definition of keeping it simple is best, because there almost isn't a simpler weapon than the Warthog. It's certainly simpler as a shotgun than the boomstick, probably with the exception of turret whip. Apart from that, it is one of the most simple weapons in the game, although a lot of the Generation 1 weapons do sort of reflect that. Anyway, so I want to show you this. This is from the website carl.gg, which is an amazing website. It's a DRG community tool that you can use to create builds and see the real truth behind it, the actual numbers. It very, very cleanly states everything you need to know about the weapon. And here this is the Warthog stats, its mods, its upgrades. And I'm not going to get too in-depth about any individual upgrades either. This is a generalised overview of the Warthog. So as I've traditionally done, I suppose we'll start with range. I'm also going to remember to put the music back on. So when it comes to range, the Warthog is for me definitively mid-range. And I think all of engineered primaries are. You would think as a shotgun that it's a close range weapon, and yes, it can be used effectively at close range, but not against a large amount of enemies. It has a very tight spread, and if you try and sort of just spray it into a crowd, you're not actually going to get much out of it. It's actually best used quite carefully and quite precisely at mid to close range. Because like I said, it has quite a tight spread. It definitely benefits from actually hitting weak points. I'd say both of the shotguns do, and it's very. I appreciate that fact that they still reward precision. The Warthog much more than the boomstick, however. So let's talk ammo. The Warthog is a appreciable ammo capacity, or should I say apt. It's really just acceptable. You can find yourself running out of ammo quickly if you use it on everything, but it's still enough for it to be used in a generalist manner. But at the same time, it doesn't have as much ammo as something like an SMG, like the Stubby. Because it's much higher damage per shot. Unfortunately, this can also result in it being overkill a lot of the time, where really to kill a grunt you need like 1.2 full shots, but that requires you to use 2 shots, and it's quite annoying sometimes, which is, in that sense, it does reward precision, because pretty much every iteration of the Warthog can one-shot a grunt to the face on any difficulty. But I would like to bring it back to this notion of simplicity, because the only thing that breaks this mould of simplicity really is turret whip, which I will go into a bit more depth in the turret whip video, or that will be more gameplay focused. Turret whip is probably my favourite thing about the Warthog. I definitely miss it when I don't use it. I don't think it's 100% essential for the Warthog to be a good weapon, but it's so powerful. I think both its tier 5 upgrades are. Making it full auto with the other one it's really nice. It adds more rate of fire as well. It makes it feel very responsive. But, you look at the other mods, there's nothing going on there. And you look at the overclocks, there's nothing particularly interesting going on here. Stun obviously isn't just ballistics. Magnetic pellet alignment speccing to weak point bonus is slightly beyond just more damage as well, but on the whole, it probably has the most simplistic overclock selection in the entire game. You could say weapons like the Zukovs or the Sabata are inherently more simplistic, but they have interesting overclocks and more interesting upgrades as well. The Warthog really keeps things simple, but it is simple but effective. It hits hard, it feels very good to use. The base recoil is fairly high, although I think the recoil mod in tier 3 is usually worth taking more often than not. But I suppose I should bring this back to purpose. The Warthog's purpose in combat, it's usually just used to clean up individual enemies. It doesn't excel in swarms at all. Turret Whip can be used to alleviate this somewhat, however, but the Warthog as it stands is best used against single targets, no matter what they be, but really just single targets. It's not very useful in situations where you have a lot of enemies to deal with. It's not very good against extremely weak enemies either, like shockers or swarmers. It's actually quite bad against those. But especially if you take armor breaking against grunts, praetorians, all types of Macteria, at mid-range it's going to deal with them very well, as long as they're on their own, or you can play in a way where you're not in much danger by taking them on. It's not a crowd clearer, and it's not like a high priority target killer. It's just a very good general purpose. You whip it out to finish things off and to handle just about anything that sort of slips through the cracks of the secondary, really. And to deal with sort of medium to weak enemies that you just encounter while roaming. And the only reason I don't call it a single target killer is because it can't really perform that function from a long range, and all of Engineer's secondaries really can be spec to achieve this. I would say the only exception being the breach cutter against oppressors. The Warthog can handle oppressors quite nicely if you can stay behind the oppressor the whole time. So now before that, I think what I'd like to do now is leave you with a few of my go-to builds for the Warthog, the ones that I've really latched onto over time and have become the ones that I just use. So it's looking fairly, forgive the sound. So yeah, it's looking fairly simple. We take lightweight magazines, you've got plenty of ammo. I don't really think the Warthog's damage is something that needs to be increased. So I like taking ammo, and that combined with the reload time, being able to take lessened recoil, it feels like an extremely responsive and effective weapon, despite the fact that we are actually far from maximising its damage per shot potential. Although armor breaking gives you more damage per shot than you might think, which is why I've come to appreciate it in that sense. The other build I would recommend uses mini shells. That stays the same, except we take this because we're going all for rate of fire. Rate of fire and accuracy. You can take either of these here, but I take armor breaking so I don't really have to worry about where I'm shooting, and I use it to just clean up just about everything. It feels very good with all secondaries. I think that's what the Warthog does best, is that it doesn't really specialise in any way. So it feels great with all three of Engineer's secondaries, which is definitely a strength that it has. So that can go away now. There's nothing about the Warthog that stands out to me as particularly flawed. I will say things like reload time and recoil, you notice them if you don't take those upgrades, but those upgrades are always available, and there's a very clear sense of choice. All of the mods, despite how simple they are, have a significant effect. I would argue the only ones that don't really matter all that much is magazine size. I would say they're fairly redundant, especially considering my two builds. One which essentially doubles your magazine size, the other which increases your reload speed, so you don't really feel the small magazine size when you use those. You might do if you use something like magnetic pellet alignment or cycle overload. So the reason I go with those two builds that sort of alleviate the magazine size or the reload speed issue is so I don't have to take those mods, because I think they're competing with more valuable mods. But apart from that, things seem very balanced. I do think Turret Whip is sort of objectively stronger than it's what it's competing with, but what it's competing with is a good pick nonetheless, and if you don't feel like you're getting much use out of Turret Whip, it's a better option for you, potentially. Same thing when it comes to overclocks. If you don't think you're getting much out of something like magnetic pellet alignment, then default to using one of the ammo ones, which are what I use.
Not because I necessarily think it needs more ammo, but I also don't think it needs more damage, so I'd rather just have the spare ammo in the back. But anyway, that's all I have to say on the Warthog without getting really in depth about individual overclocks or upgrades. Hope you enjoyed this. We'll be back next time for the Lead Storm, the minigun. I'm trying to think of something to say in Dwarven voice about the Warthog. I don't think there's no individual weapon quotes, are there? See you next time.